I'm just turning it this way, don't worry. Hey! Should I do it this way or this way? Okay, so we're here. Can you see Guatemala in the background? Maybe I can set it somewhere so I can just relax. Live. Don't worry, we don't have any viewers yet. We're building a live audience for you. That's good enough. You can kind of see me. Did Ariel just run away after she asked the question?
She was like, I'm gonna put my pants.
She's so cute. All right, so we're live. No one's here yet. People will probably watch this later. Anything anyone wants to share or say?
We just learned about pooping and we're continuing on.
We're continuing learning about pooping. What else would you learn about here?
We're how to poop more. There's 5 ways.
Okay, summarize them.
All right. 3 liters of water a day. Your first liter should be slow and steady before you even think about breakfast. Key to good water: find your local spring, and if you really care about your bowel movements, travel there and get that spring water.
Yeah, girl.
Okay. Second way to poop is to squat over your toilet. If that sounds bizarre to you, find a stool or buy a squatty potty. You want your knees...
We don't sell things, so we're not going to buy a squatty potty, but have your local carpenter make you a stool, yes?
Yeah, okay, there you go. You want your knees next to your body, and this tilts your pelvis in a way that makes the poop come out easier. Give yourself time is the third.
Way to poop more.
Yep, and to give yourself time, just start to train yourself. After a meal, go sit on the toilet. After you just talk to someone, just find something to read and distract your mind and train yourself to go to the bathroom more. And finally, the fourth, which is not the last, is probiotics, which I think we're getting into now.
Love it. Love it. Thank you, Kelly, for that summary. Everyone, this is yoga teacher training. This is the amazingness of life. How do you guys feel?
Amazing! So good. I'm constipated.
Let's get into that probiotics talk, shall we? So in discussing how to poop more, definitely I added a few more to my list. Those of you who have been hanging out with me for a while know that my 3 main ways to poop more, with which Callie just did a fantastic job at summarizing, I've expanded the list into 2 more ways. And so number 4 is indeed probiotics. And with probiotics, there are 2 offshoots as to how you can take them or absorb them in your modern life. In fact, there's more than 2. I'm going to tell you some of my latest research as well. So the first 2, of course, are pill form and then fermented food form. All right. So first of all, pill form would be any kind of capsule or sometimes even a powder that you would get at a pharmacy. And there are all differing qualities of probiotic capsules. And it will be debated until time ends because a lot of people are making a lot of money off of the whole microbiome movement. I think I told you guys that I started something called the Microbiome Think Tank. Did I tell you that? Yeah. It's a project where we're actually verifying or looking deeper into all of these claims made because probiotics are a very popular new part of alternative medicine as well as science, and a lot of people are curious about it, which gives a little outlet for a lot of people to make money and sell. And so the expensive probiotics aren't necessarily the best probiotics. In a lot of the in-depth research that I've done on probiotics, both in academic research, literature surveys, as well as on my own body and those bodies that I have the liberty to experiment with, I've found quite conclusive evidence and interesting research topic which says that you can't actually absorb or your body cannot process a strain of probiotics that you were not exposed to in utero. Which means if your mama was pregnant with you and you did not, if she did not eat sauerkraut or goat's dairy or whatever it is, yeah, that you will not be able to absorb it in adult life. So of course me, I call up my mom. I hope my mom's watching this video. Mom, get on live if you're not there. I call her up and I'm like, Mom, what were you eating when you were pregnant?
It's like raw probiotics on it. At the time it was open.
We're back on. There was a question about apple cider vinegar, and my answer was intuitively, I haven't been a fan of it. Please do the experiments on your own and let me know. But any kind of ferment has to have the mother in it. So we'll get there. Let's finish the pill form first. So as for pill forms, it just came out with an ebook. You guys can go to my website, liveforvitality.com, and download it if you don't have it yet. Great 21-day guide to revitalize and change your life. It's actually ever going to well, if indeed anything can be absorbed inside the human body, then we'll look at looking at getting some good probiotic strains that perhaps you were exposed to in utero. Things that my mom maybe would have been eating when she was pregnant with me, yogurt. Right? So we're going to look at a plain lactobacillus culture, maybe an acidophilus culture. And you can get into the different cultures and learn about the strains, or just try to get one with as many strains as possible. Right? That's a pretty good way with probiotics. I actually encourage people to gather probiotic capsules as they're traveling and be really inconsistent about taking them. So take a probiotic every single day for a week, then don't take anything for a half week, then take something for 3 weeks straight, then don't take anything for 2 weeks. Allow it to litter. Yeah, allow it to be like sprinkled on, and just be a little bit experimental. You'll know that something that you've eaten that is probiotic, whether it's a capsule or a food, works because you should be moved to go to the toilet within a half hour to an hour of taking it in. And that has to do with the microorganism response in the body. Episode 8 of my liveforvitality.com/podcast series is all about the microbiome, and I feature my partner in the microbiome project, Sterling Solomon, who's a brilliant microbiome fermentologist and knows so much about this. And so listen to that podcast if you want to learn more. In general, beyond the pill form, did you have a question about the pill? Probiotic? Probiotic capsules do on an empty stomach and or with something easily digestible like salad. Yeah, great question. However, the thing is that, again, these aren't guaranteed to be absorbed by the body. When we have probiotic or good bacteria, good or beneficial, biota, life, it's beneficial to life, good bacteria. You know, that's what it means, as opposed to antibiotic, which is against life. You see that? When we have probiotic in food form, this is fermented food, the heart of this video. Fermented foods in general are cultured foods. They're found all throughout human species, all throughout cultures, all over the world, all through time. There's a great book called Wild Fermentation by Sandor Katz, who's one of the world's leading experts on fermentation. And he also leads workshops and really interesting things that talks about fermented food products from all over the world. I've seen from fermented shark meat with my friend Vilmundur in Iceland to obviously your classic Korean kimchi, right? You can even look to in Indonesia. We have a fermented cassava, a plant root, cassava or tapioca, fermented. It's called tape. It's actually the source of much B12 supplement, vitamin B12 supplement in the fermented food itself. If we were to look at Central America, where we are here in Guatemala, you'll definitely find foods like achar, which is a vinegar, usually vinegar-based fermented sauerkraut type thing. Sauerkraut, of course, coming from Germany, a classic European example of a fermented food. And I want to just say about the achar is, especially with the vinegar, especially with commercial pickles today, even your classic dill pickle, an Eastern European kind of tradition, if it's made with a ton of salt and vinegar, it's often not actually fermented. And so you have to have that sour taste that's innate to know that it's fermented. So most things that you're buying from the grocery store, maybe they were once fermented, even if it's like dairy, they were often then pasteurized, which takes away a lot of the good bacteria inside. And so best bet for fermented foods and for probiotics in general is to make your own. And so with this, it's super easy to make your own fermented vegetables at home. It actually couldn't be easier if you tried. You essentially just blend up a little bit, make a brine, mix of vegetables blended with the water or a little bit of the base. So if you're going to put in juice from a previous sauerkraut or a store-bought sauerkraut or whatever it is to try to start. Or you can even open a probiotic capsule and put it in there. And then you're going to have sliced or cut up vegetables in whatever fashion you want. Layer on vegetable, a little bit of the liquid, layer of vegetable, a little bit of the liquid. Pound it down with your hand in a glass container, hopefully with a rubber stop seal, that then you'll put like a cabbage leaf or a cabbage log, roll it up on top so that when it expands, because of the fermentation process, it has something to expand into. Leave it, store it aside. And I make long ferments sometimes, so I would store fermented, cultured vegetables like that under my sink or under a stove for a month, 2 months, 3 months at a time. When I come back, they're really soft, really rich flavor. And you have to, of course, make sure that there's no mold growing in it. So the climate that you're in really matters. In Indonesia, it would sometimes mold, definitely for sure, but sometimes they would be so good. You can make a ferment in a hot climate in as little as 3 days. Normally in more of a European or temperate climate, it could take a week. And so if you start to cycle this, and those of you who have fermented things like kombucha, you just make it, and then once a week you visit it. When you visit it, if you make a whole new one, then you have it for the next week, and then you always have ferment available to you. It's the cheapest thing you could ask for in order to really boost your health, because the probiotics are not only regulating your digestive tract, they're also to a certain extent regulating your immunity. They're also dictating a lot of your brain health, right? Good neurological activity happening there. And of course, with brain health hand in hand comes mood. Right? Great dose of serotonin, of happiness chemicals coming from the introduction of probiotics or good bacteria into your body. Now, I would say perhaps the first mistake that most people make with making their own probiotics is adding too much salt. And this is a personal opinion. But yeah, if you look at salt on a laboratory slide, and say you have a living cell, and you add salt, it kills it because it dehydrates it. Everything on the slide dies. And so you don't need salt at all to make your own probiotics, ferment at home. You can use other flavoring agents, things like fennel, cumin seeds, herbs, whatever it is. I mean, you can even ferment raw garlic and onion. It would be very, very potent, so be careful about how much you put in. I tend to put too much in. I made my first ferment with my mom a few weeks ago. It was a great honor to be able to teach her the process of making it. And Michael, who I've told you about, one of my partners in life and in work and business, he works with me as a colon hydrotherapist. He's an expert at fermenting, and he'll get in there and he'll pound a glass to get all of the water out of the cabbage before you make it, to start the process. Really beautiful work. So he's starting his own website, Michael's Medicine. I believe it's michaelsmedicine.com, so check out for that. And he'll be sharing not only fermentation tips, but a ton of other tips as well. And when you have your own fermented vegetables like this, you can eat them with anything. If you're someone who's choosing to eat any kind of concentrated protein, especially some kind of animal protein, the best bet that you have for digesting it, since the human body is simply not meant to eat amino acid chains in the form of flesh, it's very difficult for the human body to digest. The best chance you could ever have at digesting it is with eating it with fermented foods. So be really aware of that as well. And fermented foods, you can have them with lunch and dinner like we do here. Having them with salad is great. And the difference really here is that you're gathering the good local bacteria from the area where you're fermenting it. Yeah. You're gathering that good local bacteria, you're pulling it into the food, and then you're eating a solid food that's going to pass through the entire digestive tract, thereby spilling the good bacteria everywhere it goes. Do you see that? That's very different than the pill, which might be just absorbed in the stomach or a drink or something like that, where there's not that proliferation throughout the entire digestive tract. People who do have good bacterial colonies, which are very few, because we've been exposed to a world of antibiotics, and that's not just in medication, that's also in things like hand soap. I mean, do you wash your hands at public bathrooms? And I'm not discouraging the washing of hands, although this will get to my third dose of probiotics. The one I told you was my latest research. She's like, and nodding. When we go into places like public bathrooms or even airplanes. I think Michael and I were flying to Cuba, and right before we landed, they came through the aisles and sprayed antibiotics. It's a pesticide, right? It's a killer. Things like that are crazy that that's legal in this contained environment where you're a captive audience, no choice, and they're spraying this spray, which will be rapidly absorbed into your skin, let alone the respiratory canal, right? We're exposed to antibiotics on a level far beyond anything we've ever imagined, whether that's through food. Again, we come back to the concept of eating animal food or flesh, right? Any kind of commercial meat that you're consuming, whether it's fish or whether it's beef. And mind you, if you're eating at a restaurant, more often than not, you are eating the lowest quality commercial meat, just because a restaurant is an industry. It's about the bottom line, right? And so in that situation, there's a strong likelihood that you could be consuming antibiotics that had been shot into that animal, because in a room this size, right, there would be 200 cows. That's just lunacy, right? And so because that's a viral and bacterial wasteland, right?
The water vinegar ratio.
So don't use vinegar. So that's kind of what I was saying is vinegar is not to be used. Now, if it's an apple cider vinegar with the mother culture like we were talking about before, then maybe. What I was saying with the achar specifically is that people are using vinegar to mimic the sour taste of the ferment. You don't need vinegar. You can just use water, right? You could just use the brine. Things will ferment in and of themselves. They'll ferment with the air. And so I think we were getting back to the airplane example where it should be illegal for things to be sprayed, but we're exposed to so many antibiotics. Oh, I was talking about the cows and the cows in the room, the injection of the antibiotics in the cows or in the chickens or in whatever meat you're eating. Especially think of farmed fish. People think that that's somehow ecologically more responsible. I read to you guys the statistics on the fishery in the oceans, how like versus 40 years ago, we are at like an 80% to 10% ratio of how much fish there were to how much there are now by concentration in certain areas. And that's absolutely just insane. And so people think, okay, better idea to farm the fish. Well, then you go, and a fish farm is just like a cow farm, the injection of antibiotics, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's a dangerous industry. We don't want anything to do with it. When we come into the pesticides of food, so this is food that has not been grown organically, has not been perhaps permaculturally, it's not from a farmer that you know, et cetera. The herbicides, the pesticides, and fungicides maybe sprayed on the food and in the soil as well as the fertilizer itself are often another form of antibiotics to the body when it comes in. It's against life, it kills life. And so that, along with all of our hair products, right, all of our makeup products, all of these chemicals that people are putting on their body every single day, it takes 26 seconds for your chemical shampoo to be absorbed into your skin and thus into your bloodstream. Those are all acting like a version of antibiotics as well. So I could go on and convince you of the need for probiotics. Perhaps the greatest need is the fact that the first 9 inches of topsoil are where most of the microbiota or the good bacteria of the earth are supposed to be laying. Most soil on the earth today is dead, which means also that our food is much less nutritious, right, than it used to be, and it is now, and you can tell that by the taste. Now, the way to get around this as a consumer is to go to a farmer's market, so buy it from the guy who grew it, hopefully, and your question to him is, do you compost? That's your money question that will tell you how much nutrition is in the food or not, all right? So, so getting back to the example about hand soap, because this takes us to the third form of probiotic intake. And on the second one for fermented foods, I encourage you guys to travel and eat fermented foods everywhere. So this is anything from like Italy in the south of India, where I live. There's a fermented rice cake that's dal, and it's a kind of black urad lentil, dal, and rice that's ground raw, made into a paste. The paste is fermented, and then it's steamed. It's often the first food given to a baby. It used to be my favorite food. I'm an international Italy connoisseur. I have like within 7 different countries my reviews of Italy restaurants, and so if you're going anywhere, let me know. I'll give you review, to things like the fermented shark meat or things like kimchi in Korea or wherever it is, whatever it is, miso in Japan, etc. Everywhere you look, you'll find these fermented foods. Try them out, taste them. That's a great way to litter your system with good bacteria. Popular ones today are obviously kefir, whether it's a milk kefir, a water kefir, whatever it is. We have a coconut kefir that my friend makes in Indonesia. If you're going to Bali, try it out. It's called Kefir Life. He also makes a coconut yogurt brand that I have found to be the strongest probiotic worldwide, hands down, because it's not the kefir, the liquid, but it's in coconut yogurt form, where literally the only the only ingredients are coconut meat and the kefir grains, the kefir water. And it's like a real yogurt, right? Every batch he makes is different. I used to be his taste tester. But this yogurt is going to travel through the entire digestive tract versus a kombucha or a liquid-based kefir. You see, that's a liquid and is absorbed in the stomach. So I healed my dog with it, same way to boost a dog's immune system as you would with a human's, right? Fasting, probiotics, and then some kind of naturally occurring antibiotic, if that's garlic or tea tree oil is what I used internally. And then a tremendous amount of love as well as a diet change when not fasting, right? Going back to a species-specific diet. So, for example, in my dog, and I'm looking into a whole holistic veterinary publishing. I might get into that in a little bit because I learned so much of the past 2 years of being the natural vet of my own puppy dog. But changing the diet was really the kicker. The minute I took her off grains, off rice, off anything like that, and just had meat, it was like her health skyrocketed. And so, anyway.
You just fed her meat?
Yeah.
Oh, so
and vegetables, perhaps, sometimes. Yes, they're carnivores by nature. We know that by their teeth, by their digestive tract, by all of this.
And pregnant women should eat a lot of fermented foods.
Everyone should, but yeah, definitely pregnant women because you're exposing the baby. So this brings us, I guess I'll finish the second of the probiotic advice by saying that other like popular things like kombucha, often just like people are making ferments with too much salt, people are making kombucha with tons of sugar. If it's still sweet when you're drinking it, then there's still sugar in it. That's all there is to say about it. Whereas kombucha has the potential to be medicinal. Of course, this is a Russian mushroom tea drink. Great potential. It's not meant to be drunk like a beverage. Yeah, it's a medicine. So we need to respect it as a medicine. And yeah, so fermented foods in their solid food form, I'm much more privy to. So the third limb of fermentation, the one that I'm researching more recently, and this, I don't exactly know when it started, but it definitely solidified, and I knew that this would be an avenue that I'm following down, was when I was in Flores a few months ago with, again, Michael, my partner, and my business partner, my life partner, my gay husband. He wouldn't be happy that I called him that. But we were in Flores, which is an island about 3 islands over from Bali. Highly recommended if you're going to Indonesia, you need to visit this island. It is impeccable, undeveloped. It is the wonderland. I always wanted. Ferngully was my favorite movie when I was a kid, right? And Indonesia, yeah. And this was Ferngully come to life. I was in heaven, yeah. Finally. So finally, so Ferngully was the movie. So anyway, getting back to the story, what was happening was Michael and I had bought a bunch of fruit and we were trying to figure out what we were going to carry with us up onto a hike and what we were going to eat then. And I had a pineapple, and they had delicious pineapples in Flores. I can't tell you how sweet, locally grown, sold on the side of the road, buying it from the person who grew it, that kind of thing. And so we had bought pineapple, and I asked this woman, not who I had bought it from, a different woman, to cut it for me. And so we were at her house, or I asked her if I could use her knife to cut it, and she was like, oh no, let me help you, I'll cut it for you. And so she starts opening it, she cuts off the top, right? She starts to cut off the sides. And this woman had been working with her hands, maybe, I don't know if she was doing laundry or she was handling money or grease or something. Her hands weren't the cleanest, we'll just say. And so she was cutting my pineapple, and as she cuts off all the sides, it's a very juicy, it's a ripe, properly ripe pineapple, good yellow color, not white, just real good pineapple. She's grasping at my pineapple and her fingers are going into it, these dirt-covered fingers going into the pineapple. And of course, right, raised in the United States, your first thought is, oh my God, am I going to eat that, or I need to wash it before I eat it. But I've gone through so much desocialization on my own and desocialization in the realm of health that I was able to look at her and see her hands grasping in there and actually get excited about the prospect that I was going to be delivered all of her good bacteria. Right there in her hand. And I have enough faith in my own immune system through the amount of fasting that I've done over the years and the way that I take care of myself in my lifestyle that I know I would be able to withstand any quote-unquote bad bacteria that was also coming with that. Yeah, now that's not your average human. But as she was grasping that pineapple, I knew, yes, I'm getting delivered with her good bacteria. And when we look at the translation of this into science, of course, fecal transplants are becoming more and more popular. Perhaps you've heard of them. We see cases of dis-ease healed like this, right? Whether it's anything from Alzheimer's to any other kind of autoimmune disease, if that's in a kid, autism, etc., through a fecal transplant. So this is often through healthy baby poop, but it could just be from another super healthy human. The good bacteria from that human will be prevalent and present in their stool. So the fecal transplant is taking often a small amount of that fecal matter and implanting it in another human's colon. Poop. Fecal is
fecal.
Poop, yes, fecal matter. Yeah. So transplanting it into another human's colon. Of course, Germany, which is a very forward-thinking country in the Western medical realm, they're not only doing fasting experiments pre and post-op, so before and after surgery, looking at how fasting aids the body in healing faster. Yeah, that's what I've been saying for 10 years, right? They're also doing fecal transplant experiments. And so you can look at the data on this, you can research it. It's absolutely fascinating. But when we look into it, it's one of the most powerful ways, right, to heal, by getting exposure to good bacteria, especially when it's that way. Of course, with my pineapple, I'm taking it this way. I didn't shove it up my bum. But I can only imagine that that woman gave me something. More than just the memory. So you see, exposure to things, actually being dirty, strengthens our immune system. One of my first boyfriends was French. And he always used to say, you Americans, you are always so clean. This is why you have the allergies. He didn't have anywhere near that strong of a French accent, but I thought I would remember him with potency of what it is. And in the over-cleansing and the antibioticizing that we have in modern culture, I'll expand it past the United States, we're left, right, with a wasteland where there's so little good bacteria inside, and it's so fast that we can get sick, or that our body's not really sure what's helpful and what's harmful. And so, I mean, I stand here, and I'm not really the kind of health coach that says, I had this horrible journey and this big, long disease, and I've recovered from it, and I'm here to share with you. That's never been the approach that I've taken. But in truth, what got me awakened about health was that for 5 years, through middle school and high school, I was on antibiotics every single day. For 5 years. I took antibiotics every single day. And you might ask why?
Yeah, why?
Preventative acne treatment. That's what's used in the United States.
You were on Accutane?
No, it wasn't. I mean, thank God it wasn't that strong. It was just doxycycline, monocycline, all of these different commercial antibiotics that are used, and cycled one in, one out. And that, who knows, of course, what it did to my digestive tract in my early 20s, right? When I got a little imbalanced and sick and had an awakening to, okay, wait, something's going on here, right? That was the beginning of a time to heal. And since then, it's been a rebuilding of the immune system, and experiences like that woman and the pineapple, or experiences of just not sterilizing things, right? If it's organic fruits and vegetables, and I know that pesticides weren't put on there, for sure, tons of people's hands have touched them. But if I wipe them off or a quick rinse of water, that's all that's needed, I'll eat them, right? Or eating out of the garden, exposing myself as much as I can to naturally occurring good bacteria to take it into my immune system and boost. That's my prerogative. Any other questions, Ariel, about fermented foods or fermentation in general, or the good bacteria microbiome?
When is it this?
If you have any questions on the audience, if you're watching this later, tag Andy OO or tag Andrea Page, Live for Vitality, and I'll answer your question.
Are you supposed to take fermented foods a half hour, or on an empty stomach? Sorry, or with salad also? Or
You eat them whenever you want.
1 hour?
Eat them whenever you want. Maybe not with fruit, but otherwise with vegetables, that kind of meal.
And like how often?
Daily. Have
Every
some kind of
meal
fermented
or
food
once
daily.
a meal?
See how it works for you. See what you're eating. Of course, again, see if it actually induces the bowel movement. And so the result of my own self-study from the academic study that I've done on looking at the fact that you have to consume a strain that you were exposed to in utero. I was living in France at the time, and I found that they had a soy yogurt brand. And that was the closest I would get to yogurt because I don't eat dairy.
The chicken you feed him, do you give it like raw or you cook it?
Both. Sometimes she will eat it raw, sometimes she needs it cooked.
And vegetables, like what kind of vegetables do you use?
Try to do leafy greens, but otherwise non-starchy vegetables, whatever she would eat usually.
Leafy greens,
She
and
loves
then
coconut.
do you add like any additional fats other than the?
I'll
than
give
the
her
one on the
coconut oil.
meats?
I'll give her coconut oil, but the meat normally comes with a lot of fat as well. There were times where I would give her actual chicken fat and things like that.
Cool.
Yeah, dog health.
Interesting.
Look up holistic veterinary
The two
system.
most healthy dogs I ever came across will say had just a meat diet.
For sure.
Which is,
And this is when we look at
Yeah.
species-specific diets. So when I say to you guys, fruits and vegetables not only are the easiest to digest, give you the most energy, give you everything you need, allow for most time to heal, the reason for all of that is because that's our species-specific diet. Yeah. So coming back to this last, I'm getting messages from my Michael. Hi, darling. Coming back to this last point, where did I leave off?
fermented something. You asked Ariel if there was more
When you
questions.
take them, how often a day? You said
Oh, I was
four
talking about the experiment in France, actually. Well, the answer to your question of how often to take them, see, for my experiment in France, I found that it was really, again, it wasn't necessarily the sauerkrauts that were producing the bowel movement within an hour. It was the soy yogurt. And when we go back to my mom and what I was exposed to in utero when she was pregnant with me, it was probably only yogurt. And so there could be truth to that. Does that make me stop making my own fermented foods and stop eating them? No, because I still believe that there's value in exposing myself, and of course, why not eat more vegetables? But when I get more of a solid base, will I make my own yogurt? You better bet. And still to this day, I tell you that the coconut yogurt is the most powerful probiotic I've found. So could that be different for everyone dependent upon what they were exposed to in utero? Yeah. I would love to study the effect of kimchi on a Korean person's digestive system. And this stuff hasn't been studied. And so that's what we're really looking into with the microbiome think tank, both academic research, clinical research, and then a lot of education. And so over the coming years, probably looking in toward a decade, it's a long-term project. We're going to have training classes for doctors, right, for physicians, for health coaches, for yoga teachers, for people who are just really looking to find a deeper truth as to what's going on in the microbiome, because what science has figured out thus far is that this is a whole world that will unlock